My name is Evelyn Reed. I'm 34 years old, and I'm a senior project manager at Nexus Solutions, a mid-sized tech company specializing in client retention software. The meeting started innocently enough, or at least, that's how HR wanted it to appear. Brenda, our head of human resources, sat at the head of the polished conference table, her usual austere expression firmly in place. Beside her, my direct manager, Mark, offered a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Then, the door opened, and a young woman I'd never seen before walked in. She was impeccably dressed, clutching a pristine, dark blue binder to her chest. "Evelyn," Brenda began, her voice devoid of warmth, "I'd like you to meet Chloe Jenkins. Chloe is our newest project manager, and she'll be taking over Project Phoenix." The words hit me like a physical blow. Project Phoenix. My project. The one I'd poured 18 months of my life into, the one Mark had praised as revolutionary. I felt a cold dread spread through my stomach, but I kept my face carefully neutral. My eyes, however, were fixed on Chloe's binder. It wasn't just any binder. It was the exact shade of blue I'd chosen for my own proposal, and the spine, even from across the room, looked suspiciously thick, mirroring the comprehensive proposal I'd submitted to Mark and HR just 2 months prior. As Chloe settled into the chair opposite me, she inadvertently opened it slightly. And there it was. A page with my meticulously designed framework, complete with the unique, almost whimsical, internal metric names I'd coined. Sparkle scores and glide path stared back at me in bold typeface. They had taken my project, given it to a new hire, and she was holding my secret plan. What they didn't know was that those specific phrases weren't just memorable, they were a watermark, a signature so personal, so interwoven with my unique vision, that their presence in Chloe's hands would become the very key to their undoing. To understand why this moment felt like such a profound betrayal, you need to know about Project Phoenix. I'd been at Nexus Solutions for 8 years, steadily climbing the ranks. I was known for my ability to salvage failing projects and streamline inefficient processes. I thrived on turning chaos into clarity. Project Phoenix wasn't just another task, it was my passion project, born from countless late nights and early mornings. It was a comprehensive client onboarding and retention system designed to reduce churn by a staggering 30% within the first year. I envisioned it as my legacy at Nexus, my path to a director-level position. Mark, my manager, had initially been my biggest champion. He'd encouraged me to make the proposal bulletproof, to leave no stone unturned. "Evelyn," he'd said, leaning back in his chair during one of our early brainstorming sessions, "this is the kind of initiative that gets you noticed at the top. Put everything you have into it. Make it undeniable." So I did. I pored over market research, user experience data, and internal metrics. I designed every flow, every feedback loop. My proposal wasn't just a technical document, it was a narrative, a vision for the future of Nexus's client relationships. One of the elements I was particularly proud of was the internal metric naming convention. Instead of dry, corporate jargon, I wanted something memorable, something that would resonate with the team and make the data feel more approachable. That's how Sparkle Scores for client satisfaction and Glide Path for onboarding efficiency were born. I even included a detailed explanation in my proposal about the psychological reasoning behind these names, how they fostered a more positive and proactive approach among the client success teams. It was a small detail, but it was uniquely mine, a subtle watermark of my creative input. I submitted the full 120-page proposal, complete with detailed timelines, budget projections, and those unique metrics, to Mark and Brenda in late March. After I submitted Project Phoenix, the enthusiasm from Mark seemed to wane. Weeks turned into a month, then 6 weeks. Each time I asked for an update, Mark was vague. "HR is reviewing resources," he'd say, "or we're facing some budget constraints for new initiatives." He'd tell me to focus on my current, less exciting projects, assuring me that Phoenix was on the radar and just needed the right timing. I trusted him. I had no reason not to. We'd worked together for years. I assumed the corporate gears just turned slowly, especially for something as ambitious as Phoenix. Then, the whispers started. I'd overhear snippets in the break room about a big new initiative and a star hire coming in to lead it. My ears perked up, but I dismissed it. Nexus was a large company, there were always new projects. It couldn't be Phoenix, because Phoenix was my baby, and it was supposedly on hold. I even tried to access my Project Phoenix files on the shared company drive one afternoon, needing to reference a specific methodology I'd developed for another task. To my surprise, the folder permissions had been changed. I no longer had access. Only Mark and Brenda were listed as having viewing rights. A knot of unease tightened in my chest, but I was swamped with deadlines. I made a mental note to ask Mark about it, but the moment passed. The day Chloe walked in with my binder, everything clicked into place. The vague answers, the delays, the changed permissions, the whispers, it all coalesced into a sickening realization. They weren't just delaying Phoenix, they were stealing it. They were taking my meticulous work, my vision, and handing it over to a new, presumably cheaper, hire. The sight of sparkle scores and glide path on Chloe's page was like a physical punch. It was undeniable proof. They hadn't just copied the technical specs, they'd copied my very soul, the personal touches that made Project Phoenix uniquely mine. Mark and Brenda hadn't just put my project on hold, they had put me on hold, intending to sideline me while someone else took credit for my innovation. The Phoenix, my symbol of rebirth and career ascent, was indeed rising, but they intended for it to rise from my ashes, not theirs. The meeting continued, a blur of corporate jargon about synergy and fresh perspectives. I sat there, nodding occasionally, my mind racing. I was devastated, yes, but beneath the hurt, a cold, hard anger began to solidify. They had underestimated me. They hadn't accounted for the fact that I was a project manager who documented everything. As soon as the meeting ended, I excused myself, feigning a sudden headache. Instead of going home, I drove to a quiet coffee shop, pulled out my personal laptop, and accessed my cloud storage. Every iteration of Project Phoenix was there, meticulously organized by date and timestamp. I had the initial concept drafts from 18 months ago, the detailed research notes, the early sketches of the user interface, and, most importantly, the comprehensive proposal I'd submitted in March. I found the specific section where I introduced sparkle scores and glide path, complete with my written explanation of their unique purpose and the reasoning behind their names. I even had a series of email exchanges with Mark where we discussed these very terms, him praising their innovative simplicity. It was all there, irrefutable proof of my authorship. The next call I made was to Sarah, a former HR vice president who had mentored me early in my career. She listened patiently as I recounted the entire story, my voice tight with suppressed fury. Evelyn, she advised calmly, this is serious. Intellectual property theft within a company, especially if the company stands to profit significantly, can have major repercussions. Your first step is to gather all your documentation. Don't just rely on what's on the company server. Get everything you have personally. Keep quiet for now. Don't make any accusations. Present the facts, the undeniable proof, and let them explain themselves. And be prepared to state exactly what you want as a resolution. Her words solidified my resolve. I wasn't just hurt, I was armed. The following morning, I sent a polite email to Brenda and Mark, requesting a follow-up meeting to discuss the transition strategy for Project Phoenix. I specifically asked that Chloe not be present, stating I wanted to ensure a smooth handover of my historical knowledge directly to them. This was a lie, of course, but a necessary one. I needed them alone. When we met, I was calm, almost unnervingly so. I started by congratulating them on finally moving forward with Project Phoenix, keeping my tone professional. I'm glad to see the company is finally investing in such a crucial initiative, I began, my hands clasped on the table. And I wanted to make sure we covered all the bases for the transition. Then, I pulled out my own, slightly worn, dark blue binder. I placed it gently on the table between us. It looked almost identical to Chloe's. As you know, I continued, opening my binder to a specific page. I spent a considerable amount of time developing this proposal. I included not just the technical specifications, but also a unique approach to internal metrics that I believed would foster greater team engagement and client satisfaction. I pointed to the section detailing sparkle scores and glide path. I remember discussing these specific terms with you, Mark, and you found them quite innovative. Mark shifted in his seat, his eyes darting between me and Brenda. Now, I couldn't help but notice yesterday, I said, my voice dropping slightly, but still perfectly level, that Chloe's binder contained these exact same, rather unique, metric names and the accompanying framework. Given that my project was supposedly on hold, and these elements are central to my original, fully documented proposal from March, I'm curious to understand how this happened. I then slid a printout of my original submission email, dated and timestamped, across the table, followed by the email exchanges with Mark where we discussed the specific terminology. I've also spoken with my mentor, Sarah Jensen, who, as you know, has extensive experience in corporate intellectual property. She advised me to ensure all documentation was in order. Brenda's usually unreadable face finally cracked. Her lips thinned, and she glanced sharply at Mark. Mark, meanwhile, was visibly flustered, stammering something about similar ideas and parallel development, but his words lacked any conviction. Brenda, ever the HR professional, quickly took control. Evelyn, this appears to be a serious miscommunication, she said, her voice tight. An internal process review will certainly be necessary. I met her gaze, unwavering. A miscommunication that resulted in my intellectual property being handed to a new hire, effectively sidelining me from a project I poured my heart into. I expect full credit for Project Phoenix, including a formal acknowledgement of my authorship, the opportunity to lead it as was implicitly promised through my years of dedication, and a promotion to director. I believe my work speaks for itself, and my contribution to Nexus has always been significant. If this cannot be resolved internally and amicably, I will, unfortunately, have to consider my options, including publicizing this situation and exploring legal avenues. My statement was firm, not a threat, but a clear declaration of my boundaries and expectations. The silence that followed was heavy, punctuated only by the hum of the conference room lights. Brenda knew I wasn't bluffing. The company couldn't afford the bad press or a potential lawsuit, especially over something so clearly documented. Within a week, the landscape at Nexus Solutions had dramatically shifted. I received a formal, albeit carefully worded, email from Brenda, stating that due to an administrative oversight, Project Phoenix had been incorrectly assigned. I was officially reinstated as the lead, with Chloe reassigned to a different, smaller initiative. Mark received a formal reprimand, was put on a performance improvement plan, and his direct managerial oversight of me was removed. His reputation within the company was undeniably tarnished. Brenda, despite her attempts to smooth things over, now treated me with a cautious respect, but our relationship was permanently fractured. 3 months later, Project Phoenix launched successfully, exceeding all initial projections. My promotion to director came through, along with a significant bonus tied to the project's success. The company also implemented new, stricter protocols for internal project submissions and intellectual property protection, something I helped draft. I still lead Project Phoenix, and it continues to thrive. It was a much harder, more painful rebirth than I ever imagined, a true rising from the ashes of betrayal. I still use sparkle scores and glide path in all my reports and presentations. But now, when I see those phrases, they don't just represent client satisfaction and efficient onboarding, they represent my own quiet, hard-won victory.